Hello, everyone. My name is Nida Kulshaw, and I was going to present Smart Cities, a Step to the Future in person. However, due to technical issues, I wasn't able to connect very well. So I wanted to at least send not only the presentation in a paper format or digital format, but also to record this presentation for you, so that way you would have a chance to watch it at another time. And so again, apologies for not being able to do this live for you and with you. So just to get started very quickly, I am a lecturer at the Grenoble École de Management, and I teach courses that are around this topic of smart cities. One of them is for the MBA program, which is Smart Societies, for their specialization in sustainable business. And another course that I teach as well is for social entrepreneurs and their business ecosystem. So I am pleased to give this presentation, which is a combination of the things that I talk about in the classroom, as well as my own investigation and research as well. So I knew this was 45 minutes, so let's get started quite quickly. Just to quickly say that the objectives that I had for this particular session was to share with you the ingredients of a smart city and the components. And so what is part of a smart city? What are inside of it? What are the materials or the things that you need to think about, the factors that you need to think about? And the second piece of the presentation is going to be about the smart city objectives and dynamics. That is the interconnection and the interdependence that smart cities require and need of you. So let's begin. When you think of societies, we've sort of moved through different kinds of phases. We look at society 1, 0.2, 0.3, 3.0, 4.0, and we're moving into and sort of are in society 5.0, which is where you have a lot of super smart or things that are named smart around you. There's, of course, cyberspace and physical space, especially, unfortunately, with COVID and distance learning and all of the things that have been pushed online. You have material 5.0, which means materials that are actually created, that are designed using science and using technology, that don't come from nature solely. And so you have autonomous driving and so forth. But you also have at the very bottom, the fact that the city ideals are really focused on humanity, and that we're moving closer to thinking about cities for the people of which live in that city. And how can those cities better serve their citizens? So let's talk about that word smart and what does smart mean? I'm going to move my camera here. So what does smart mean? What is a smart? Well, smart could mean smart car, smart home, smart building. And here what you're talking about is smart is the functionality of something, that it can do it autonomously, possibly without, again, a lot of human interaction there, using sensors, artificial intelligence, and different technologies. You can also use smart when you're talking about school, a smart school or a smart learning environment. Here, it's not specifically that things happen autonomously, but that the students themselves are able to plug into smartness or smart devices or other ways of learning that elevate or expand their education experience. Or you have smart that is attached to things that devices or services that we hear all the time: phones, cars, homes, buildings, etc. But if you think of the term a smart city or smart society, you also have sub-elements. You have other things that are inside of the smart: governance, citizens, and a way of life. And all of those subsystems, those pieces, also mean that for a city to be smart, it's not just the technology. It also has to include the governance. It also has to include the citizens, and it also has to include the way of life. So if I think about the human-centered smart society, and I'm going to move my camera over here to the right. Well, here, innovation is not just for innovation's sake. If you look at this column, you have smart city or Smart Society 4.0, and Smart Societies 5.0. The objective really that smart cities are starting to move towards is not it's just technology driven, that we're trying to optimize infrastructure. We're moving towards dealing with social challenges, the big challenges or the grand challenges or the wicked problems as they might be called. That we're thinking about things from a people-centered point of view. Yes, technology will play a role, but that it is not the center of what we do. It is part of and helps us achieve what our objectives are. We're also thinking about cross-sector relationships. In other words, we are no longer in our silos and just working individually or separately from one another, but we're also trying to combine forces. We are looking at analytics, and so there could be a lot of data. Big data plays a big role here. And there's an enhancement of well-being. So for our citizens, this is really what we're looking for. It's not just about sharing the value for a limited number, but enhancing the well-being for as many of the citizens as possible. Citizens themselves in the past, in the 4.0 factor, really were passive, meaning that things happened to them. They were not really involved in developing them or being part of the conversation. The idea here is that now citizens will have a much more active role. So smart cities themselves are, if you see at the top, today we see a clear shift from smart cities to smart society as cities strive to move towards a more citizen-centered approach to problem solving. It's really about putting the citizen as part of the catalyst to get stuff going. Now, I'm going to be expanding a little bit about all of the different elements of the factors, the ingredients that play into creating a smart city. But first, I want to talk about the definition. I'm just going to give you a minute to go ahead and look at these definitions that are here on the screen and read a few of them. You can jump around, don't have to go in order. And as you start to look at it, there's going to be some similarities and some things that are very different. There is no one definition for a smart city. You have sort of clusters of ideas. The first cluster is emphasizing that there's one main aspect that you're focusing on. So it could be technological implementation or an ecological question that you're trying to address. And it leaves the rest out of the conversation. And so it's really just sort of a mono-focused or solo-focused initiative. Now, sometimes the definitions of what a smart city is will also emphasize the main differences in the interconnections of the urban aspects. So it's infrastructure, social, institutional, and it's all mixed together. The idea is that it is really the connections of all of these elements that plays a big role. Now, I'm going to be using this definition, and this is the definition that I have taken from the ASCIMR, which is Assessing Smart Cities in the Mediterranean Region, which is a really very interesting report. The reference information, by the way, for all of these slides are at the bottom, so that way you can go ahead and get this information on your own. There is a PDF that you can download that gives a lot more details than what I am going to be covering, but it does give you some essence to it. So for a smart city is an integrated system that interacts with human and social capital using ICT, which is an information communicating technology based solutions. It aims to efficiently achieve sustainable development and high quality of life based on multi-stakeholder, so several different players at the table, municipally based partnership, also talking about on the ground as local as possible. So a smart city concept involves a user-centric approach, considering urban issues from the perspective of the citizens' needs. In the past, smart cities sometimes felt more like smart projects. There were things that were cool or interesting, nice to do, but not really connected to maybe the larger issues of that particular city or the region around it. So a smart city, if I move from the left to the right, A smart city incorporates the human and social capital of that location, the natural resources found there, and the economic resources that are available. Now, of course, you're going to include the ICT-based solutions, so you're going to have some technology. It's going to include multi-stakeholders and, again, municipally based partnerships, so you are looking for local connections. And all of that will mix to provide three things. And so the goal of a smart city is to provide sustainable development, to increase efficiency in whichever area it is focused on, and we will be discussing that in a few minutes, and the quality of life for the citizens of that city. Now, there are these two terms that are sometimes used not exchangeably or sometimes exchangeably, but they don't really mean the same thing. So when we are thinking about a sustainable city versus a smart city, what's the difference? Well, sustainable development includes the environment, economic, and social elements. As you can see with the crossovers, you're going to have sustainability in the middle, where it is a livable environment, where it is viable, not only environmentally, but economic, and also it's equitable, which means that everyone, most hopefully, are being able to benefit from the things that are occurring. So yes, sustainable development. But SMART adds just a little bit of a different layer. If you look at the center of the image here, you will see what was on the right, but it's the factors around it that add the smartness. It is incorporating the human factors and the human element, institutional factors, and this includes government, or technological factors. And again, that talks about which technology am I implementing where it could enhance what we do. So when a city strategy takes those three factors, so technology, institutions, and people into account, working collaboratively and interwoven way, and focused on sustainable development goal, which is in the center, that's when we talk about a smart city strategy. It is the culmination of sustainable development essence, along with the technological, human, and institutional factors thrown in to enhance that development. So now when you take a look at that picture, again, we have the same elements here. The center is sustainable. You have the three in the blue, which we've just talked about, which brings it to smart. But you also have some other words that are now added, which are around human factor, technological factor, as well as environmental and economic. These words that are in the green, are in the gray, sorry, are also the types of words that you may have heard of before that are related to, but not are exactly smart. It's not a smart city. It's pieces of the puzzle. I'm going to go clockwise, beginning with human factor. In human factors, you have the human infrastructure and social capital. It means who is there, the educational systems that are there, universities that might be able to give you researchers or research capability or capacity. What are the creative elements that are there? Arts, culture, that can add to some of the other resiliences of the city. So you have a creative, humane learning and knowledge city, and that is a little bit along the human factor. That's pieces of the puzzle. I go to the far left, and you have technological factors. Institutional factors are first on the bottom. Governance, policy, regulation, and directives. And so who and what is the governing bodies that are playing in this field, whether it is city government, regional government, national government? What are the policies that they have in place? What things could they adjust? What things could they add? What things could they remove that are blockers that might be getting in the way of becoming or enabling a smart environment? Regulations and directives have also a huge impact on that as well. Now, technological factors like physical infrastructure that is actually there, and this could be the wires, the cabling, or the Wi-Fi. There could be smart technologies like sensors that are placed, mobile, virtual, digital networks. All of that will play as possible, as I say, on the menu. What are the things that I might choose to be able to make or create our version of a smart city? Because as I've been talking about, these are factors or ingredients, components. They aren't specifically everybody has to use everything. And so it is really actually up to the city, up to the people, up to the area, the region, to decide what is important to us and what do we focus on the most. So a smart city should be understood as an integrated system that manages the public and private issues through a holistic approach. A smart city strategy must have a global point of view of its issues and understand its interrelationships and connections that are produced between them. It is systemic. It is actually a complex system. And so understanding a smart city as a system also implies that the city and its influence area can be seen as a functional system itself. It's composed of different interrelated components with a common objective. That creates complexity. It does make it a little bit difficult to get everything done in the speed in which you may want, but at the end, you will have more acceptance of, embracing of whatever it is that has come up with, because there have been more input and more more input and more people being involved. So a smart city strategy not only affects the administrative definition of the city, because people might term it, ooh, it's a nice smart city, but it also will affect the nearby towns because they're somehow connected to that big city economically, socially as well. And so what ideas or what initiatives that may be put into place for a large city will impact in kind of ripple effect those that are closest to it or those that have a deep relationship with it. So the scope of those connections may reach really far out, even out to the region. And so what is really important to think about is the information and communications technology, the ICT, is what makes it a little bit different, meaning that it moves it out of just being sustainable and into smart. And increasing the quality of life and making sure that it is efficient is an end goal. So just a few things for thought. The use of technology or ICT does not mean that the city should make big investments to acquire technological things without a final goal. That would be a misunderstanding of a smart city concept. It's not the more technology, the better. It is using it if it's necessary, where it makes sense, and for the purpose of moving something further, farther, faster, but not just because it's kind of cool. Smart and medium cities that can't afford the latest technology can also be smart cities. You don't have to have the cutting edge. Again, it is really about deciding what is most needed, important, and what makes the most sense for your particular community. A smart city must be based on a multi-stakeholder, municipally based partnership. This is based on the European Parliament and the way that they see smart cities. So although city authorities have a main role to play, it is also important that there's public and private partnerships, citizen participation as much as possible to be able to use all of the collective intelligence and also the resources that are available to be able to move the initiatives further. The value of a smart approach comes from not only joining up systems, but also ensuring that people are trained in the skills that are required. So without the engagement of citizens and stakeholders, the city can never be smart. Now that is a far end statement. In some communities, involving everybody may seem completely overwhelming, but there's ways in which to engage the community to provide feedback in ways in which it can be then incorporated and it can make sense for them. Urban systems are also open systems. And again, they do interact with the larger context around them. So thinking about city initiatives and also taking into account the ripple effects will be important. So now the 6 pillars. I just wanted to touch on very quickly the 6 that you see here. The first being society, quality of life, environment, government, mobility, and economy. So I'm going to start with society. Here, when we're talking about society, we're also talking about the needs of the citizens that are there, but also the intelligence that they can bring to the table. What is it that they can also share with you in the process of designing your ideas? Education plays a huge role, making sure that you are connecting to universities. What creativity or creative people are there? And how can you bring to the table as many voices as possible? Quality of life. A smart city is also thinking about the culture and the well-being of their citizens. Health is one of the biggest areas, as well as safety. What are the things that you might be doing to be able to bring health closer to people? During the COVID pandemic, there was all of a sudden this very interesting thing called telemedicine, where, yes, in the past it did exist, but maybe not a lot of people took advantage of it, or it seemed only expensive for the others. But then it became actually quite helpful when you weren't able to go to the doctor, but you could see them at a distance. So this is also one of those types of examples where a smart city might say, okay, we're going to support local pharmacies or local doctors to be able to do this in a much more efficient way, which means that for those that are in very far away rural areas where it's difficult to reach, we can at least provide good health services. This is one of the types of ways that a smart city could consider increasing the quality of life. Environment is also one of the areas where most people think about when you talk about smart city. It's sustainability in the building of buildings themselves. It could be the resource management and also urbanism. And so considering how you build new neighborhoods, are you considering water capture, like capturing the rain and then being able to reuse that in a particular intelligent way? It's not just thinking about, again, the technology, but how can we do what we are going to do anyway, which is building a new area, but do it in a way in which it can serve more purposes, where it can be smarter. At the bottom, government. Open data, as I've talked about, transparency of that data is also a question, a need, and also a discussion. And so whenever these types of new things are being implemented, also considering the other side effect of data. Infrastructure in the government, the administration of it, and online services. Again, thinking of COVID-19, there was a lot of movement to upgrading the online services of government, where you used to be not forced to, but almost forced to, because that was the only option that you had, was to go face-to-face into an office, where all of a sudden they were like, okay, no, that form is now available online. You don't have to come and pick it up. Or actually, there's a way in which you can submit it online now, where before you had to mail it in. And so it is also considering what can we do to make our processes easier for citizens. Economy. So the enterprise and innovation culture, what is the startup culture that you might have, or the innovative culture? Is there something that the government could do to support that thinking? Productivity, and again, local and global connections. What partnerships are you making to enhance that economy area? And then the last is mobility. So infrastructure and technology. Here it could be smart traffic lights, other things that make it easier for people to cross the bridge at a certain period of time. And so the lights automatically start switching when they know that it is a certain time of day based on the way in which people use that particular bridge. There's been some bridges that I've noticed where the lanes will change. And so during the morning, there's 4 lanes open going in this direction and only one this way. And then in the afternoon, they switch. And so there's 4 coming this way and only 1 going that way to be able to manage the flow of the traffic. Efficient transport. And so this is where we get into public transportation, which creates its own mobility dynamic, but it could also be multimodal mobility. The scooters that I'm starting to see everywhere now, there might be other ways, shared bicycles, shared vehicles. And so these fall into this category of mobility. So the goals for most smart projects around the world are focused on energy efficiency, new urban development of some kind, and again, this can be super creative depending on the area where they are, innovative technology development, and so on. Energy efficiency, as you see, is reduction of carbon emissions or energy use. This is where you end up with the smart lamps on the streets or other ways in which we can reduce our energy use and carbon footprint. Now, that's global level. But if I break it into regions, and this is, again, another wonderful resource of which you have a link at the bottom here, the numbers come from 2016. You will see the EU, North America, Asia, and Latin America. And what is interesting is the differences in the needs and the focus. Energy efficiency is in gray. Innovative technology development is in sort of a greeny blue. Dark blue is citizen participation. City management is in a much lighter blue. And then open data is sort of a kind of gray blue at the end. So you can just sort of scan this image and notice that depending on where you are, your focus is also going to be different. And this is one of the big messages that I want to make sure that you're taking away from this presentation, is that there is no one way of doing it, and everybody has different priorities. Just to give you an example, and this comes from, again, that Smart City Concept and Challenges presentation PDF. And again, it goes into super details about this if you are interested. These are the city challenges for European cities. And when they say European, they're focused on EU countries. And if you look at it, here's the governance, economy, mobility, as we've talked about, environment, and people, and living. So governance and different in the different areas, you'll notice, and just go ahead and scan it. You'll notice that these are the things that they're focused on. These are the questions, the problems, the issues. You have social cohesion in living. You have holistic approach to environmental and energy issues. You have economic decline in some places, and so on. Urban sprawl, cybersecurity, and cybersecurity comes up a lot in different places. But this report was really focused on the Mediterranean. And so if I want to compare the two and show you, these were the issues that were noted for South and East Mediterranean cities. You will see some crossover, but then a lot of things that are different. Rapid growth instead of declining growth. You have pollution. You have deficit of social services, not enough. Slum proliferation, gaps between government and governed, shortage in access to technology. So where in Europe, they may be focused on different questions around technology, here, the question is about access. It's not specifically about making it easier or thinking about how to increase the infrastructure, as you see here, ICT infrastructure. So what is a takeaway from here is to think that a smart city project should not follow the same strategies in one or another urban area, because the challenges, the starting conditions, the available resources, and the citizens' willingness are completely different. So smart city is sort of like whatever has been decided is smart. It is thinking about all of the different elements and components, creating a harmonizing kind of larger work together so that there's some synergy, that it isn't a pet project, something fun over here to do. Solar panels on top of the buildings on the right because there was a donation, and now we're going to have new electric buses, but there's no cohesive thought about how these things work together. Do they enhance each other? How are they connected? And how can we also benefit from that connection? Because sometimes there's increased benefit efficiency as well that can be made when those things are connected. So in this picture, you just have, again, a few ideas: smart government, smart marketing, manufacturing, and so on. So here, the idea is to walk away with three thoughts. These three things: it's important to realize the individuality of each city and country, and it is important to consider the individual citizens. So the ingredients of what you have, the social capital, the society's creativity, innovation, what is the education level, what are the things that are most concerning for citizens, are the things that need to be considered when you are considering what you want to do for a smart city. It is also important to look at the dynamics within communities. So who have or have not been brought to the table in the past in conversations, who should be included, is considering those as well. The groups of citizens, as well as their interactions with smaller and bigger ecosystems. So it's not only the city, but what are the villages that are close by or other towns that may have, again, a social or economical link to the larger city. And thinking about how you would connect technologies to that smart city, if it makes sense, and where it makes sense. So in the end, if you ask 10 different people from 10 different countries what a smart city is for them, you'll get 10 different answers. And you'd probably get a similar answer if you ask them what they expect to hope to get from the city that they live in, because again, expectations are different. So I encourage you to consider the elements, consider the fact that it is an interdependent and interconnected complex system, and that smart cities, which are here on the far left, have human capital, infrastructure capital, entrepreneurial capital, social, natural environment, all feeding into it. But you also have other factors that come around and touch it. Education, management in organizations that exist. What is the economy that is built there? What infrastructure do you have to work with? What policies are in play with the governance? And what kinds of things can be shifted? What does the population expect? And if you look at the center here, you have investments. Where is the money coming from? Are these coming from grants? Is this taxing? Is this coming from funding that is as a one-time thing, or is it something that is reoccurring all the time? And then in the far right is the information management. So here, of course, you're going to have the technology, but how are we handling it? What are the characteristics of that? What kind of technology are we using? And what are the types of information that we're gathering, data, and using? How are we safeguarding that? I give you the example of safety. In the past, if you wanted to make sure that a neighborhood was safe, you might just put more policemen out or police ladies, women out. But now you might consider to use sensors or cameras to be able to detect certain movements or situations to be able to see. That's also used now for traffic and for traffic violations. But how do you also manage the data that's being captured, all the video? And so these are also questions that need to be considered when you are thinking about implementing smart city projects. So with that, I just want to say thank you, gracias. And again, apologies for not being able to do this live, but I do hope that you find this short, brief touch on smart cities, at least the beginning of your exploration. And again, you will find more resources that are inside of the presentation. Many thanks.